Can you hear me in the room?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
Good morning, everybody. We're going to begin. Welcome to the meeting of the West London Economic Prosperity Board on Thursday, the 18th of January. We are hopefully scheduled to be here for about an hour or so, if not sooner. So we're going to work through the agenda at pace. So let's begin. Apologies for absence and substitutions. I believe Councillor Barry Rawlings will be joining us shortly online. I have apologies from Paul Osborne and from Niall Bolger from Hounslow. We welcome Councillor Tom Bruce, who is here substituting on behalf of Councillor Rajawat. Councillor, but you are in attendance. Are there any more?
Alice Lister, Corporate Director for Planning Regeneration at Brent. She's not feeling too well, so gives her apologies today.
Unless I'm sure we can notify Cornelia if there's any further. The next agenda item is the election of vice chair. Now, under the sort of the informal arrangements that are in place for the WLA, that's brokered by party political representation. The vice chair is currently open, but of course we're going to try and resolve that. So I'm proposing that we continue to defer that until that is resolved, if members are happy. And then declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? If there are none, then let's move to the minutes of the last meeting from the 7th of July. Unless there are any corrections, are they agreed? Are they agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. We're now going to move on to the West London Vision, the Economic Prosperities and the West London Economic Prosperity Board forward plan. This follows from the meeting of the WLA in December, at which high-level sort of vision statement was agreed. And of course, some of the influencing work that will need to happen in advance of an event that may or may not happen in May/November/January. And of course, as West London authorities, we want to be on the front foot to make sure that we're making the argument for not just economic growth in our part of the world, but also the evolution that we're going to need to achieve some of that. So, David, I think you're going to take us through, aren't you, some of the highlights as well as the forward plan. So, over to you.
Thank you, Councillor Mason, and apologies, I was meant to be in the room, but horrendous delays on the train, so I've had to jump off at London Bridge. I'm calling from London Councils. So this item is around the vision and the forward plan. As Councillor Mason said, the vision was agreed in December by the leaders. The vision is for our joint work across economic, social and environmental priorities. So it's broader than what this Economic Prosperity Board covers. The headline vision is connected communities in the world's most connected place today and tomorrow. The vision recognises the strengths of West London's economy, which has bounced back since the pandemic. It also recognises that exclusion and inequality remains an issue for many of our residents, and that the challenges around pollution and climate change are very real. In short, the vision builds on the corporate plans of the individual WA boroughs with a focus on what we can do better together. It's underpinned by 4 strategic aims: a more productive West London, a more resilient West London, and sorry, I missed out the first one, a more inclusive West London, a more productive West London, a more resilient West London, and a more influential West London. So the forward plan that we've put on the agenda, it's for the board's consideration, and it's aligned to the vision and the strategic aims, and it runs to Q4 2024-25. It covers London as a polycentric city, and also our work on employment support, which we're intending to bring to the board in April. It also covers the West London Orbital and next steps. West London Orbital is on the agenda for this meeting, but we're intending to bring that back to this board in July as well. And at that time, we'd be looking to bring something to the board on our inward investment and business retention and growth. For the following board, towards the end of this calendar year, we're proposing that we bring a paper on the priorities and devolution. So the mayor's priorities, because we will have a mayoral election in May, but also on devolution. And by the end of the year, we may have had a general election, so we may want to take stock take on that. But we're also proposing that the Q4 meeting looks at the position, because by then we should almost definitely have had the general election. And we're also proposing in the final quarter of the financial year to bring forward a discussion on opportunities around supporting stronger economic partnerships around Heathrow and the M4 corridor. And on that meeting, we'd also want to bring something on the work that we're doing on energy constraints, which is a real issue for West London. We've proposed some additional topics as well in the forward plan, which could be brought in, and we probably want to cover over the year. And that include digital innovation in clusters, business improvement districts, and anchor institutions work, and in particular, work that we're doing across the North West London ICS and NHS more generally around the link between economic growth and health inequalities. And the other thing the forward plan covers is a list of potential organisations and people that we might want to invite to future meetings. So I'd welcome the board's feedback on the forward plan. In particular, have we missed anything key? Does it support the 4 strategic aims in the vision? And are there any other suggestions around organisations and invitees that we may want to bring to future board meetings?
All right, thank you very much, members. My first observation is that the having Professor Andrew Jones from Brunel come to contribute to a discussion on economic growth at the West London Economic Prosperity Board, it's actually quite clever because, of course, as the cabinet member in Hammersmith as well, it's another way of making sure that we've got a quorum. So I think I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to that discussion. I know that there's work that's happening, both West London Alliance, London Councils, and I think we're doing a little bit of work ourselves on this. Members, any reflections on the forward plan? Speak of Hammersmith and Fulham, and they shall arrive. We welcome Councillor Cowan to his seat. Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
I just want to say, I think the discussion that the leaders had in December, I think is productive, and I think the linking in each of the borough plans and priorities, right, absolutely makes sense, and trying to bring it all together in this manner, right, does give us sort of some clarity about and purpose as a board as well. And personally, I think the thing around the West London Orbital and the discussions around there are going to be sort of key going forward as well. And I actually support this going forward as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Any more contributions on the forward plan? If we're all content. Oh yeah, Councillor Bruce.
that
That
one.
one. My only observation, I think all the things are absolutely right to talk about, might be the West London energy constraints issue, whether that needs to be brought forward somewhat to talk about an earlier. I mean, it's certainly something that is raised quite often now for a lot of different stakeholders. So leaving it till this time next year, noise becomes louder, doesn't it? And maybe something and some response to that. But obviously some work needs to be done beforehand. So I don't know, balancing that up, that would be my only observation.
David, perhaps could you give a précis on where we are on the energy network work, and whether or not we can maybe think of bringing that forward?
Yeah, I think the reason we did put it towards the end of the year was because, as Councillor Bruce says, there is quite a bit of work to be done, and Anthony is closest to that. I don't know if you're able to either report on it now, or whether maybe we want to circulate something afterwards if we haven't got an up-to-date report on that work.
So we don't have an up-to-date report, but what I can tell you is that borough officers working with the GLA are making slow progress. We're chipping away at connections where possible. So there's work going on in the background. We're not yet in a position to gather what's been delivered in the last few months to give it to you. And we're also waiting for the GLA to publish the local area energy plan, which they hope to do, I believe, in February, once they've consulted with you later this month.
Okay, great. Well, so let's keep that under review, and if we feel that we can bring something forward, then we should certainly sort of aim to do that. Councillor Cowan, any reflections on the forward plan?
Councillor Cowan, I don't know if you've got, I can't hear you. I don't think you've got your mic switched on if you are speaking.
That button. Okay, this one's got a big nuclear sign. We haven't fired anything, have we? No. Okay. No, I think there's a lot of solid work in this. It's a good paper, sort of bringing us all together. We're quite a disparate bunch of boroughs, and so that work's reflected. My only, I suppose, point would be on point 2.2. The headline vision is more, I think, it probably leans into more being a statement of what we think we are, like a slogan, rather than a vision of the future we think we're heading into. And I wonder, given our huge potential as a sub-region of London, and given what's happening in different parts of the sub-region, with film industries going into Ealing, the sort of corridor running through the A4 and M4, the sort of work Mo's been doing around Wembley, and what we're doing with our economic, our innovation district. I think we could probably make a statement about really the power of West London and where that's going to go. And I would encourage that. I mean, for me, I think a vision is about where you're going to be and what your direction of travel is, because it empowers people to then to follow in on that. And I would say, we stand every chance, given the changes in tech, of being the economic powerhouse of the UK by the mid part of this century. I think we could overtake the City of London on our current trajectory. So I would be looking to put something in that's maybe inspiring in terms of, and exciting about what we're trying to, where we're going. And I would make that tweak.
Yeah, my only understanding of Councillor Cowan is that, I wasn't there myself, but this was discussed at the December WLA board meeting, and I think this was that vision statement comes from the new adopted vision. So, if I can respond as well. Yeah, go ahead, David.
Yeah. Yes. So, what I didn't mention when I was describing the vision is that there is an influencing strategy that sits with it as well. And that vision goes across not just the economy work, but our social care work as well. So I think there's an opportunity with the influencing strategy, which the leaders have asked us to develop further, to actually have something which is a bit more specific and addresses the points that you're making there, Councillor Cowan. And that actually, it could be the narrative around that could be developed through this board to sort of talk about the economic prosperity. So I think there is some work underway to kind of describe the West London economy in a much more kind of inspiring way. And I think we're aiming to do that through the influencing strategy work. But there's nothing stopping us having an economic vision as well. Previously, the WLA has had a separate economic vision. Our timing was a bit out the last time we produced an economic vision, because it was February 2020, and then we had the pandemic in March 2020, and we moved into the recovery work, which Councillor Cowan, you obviously led that work. So if we do want to, if this board thinks we should actually come up with an economic vision, which sits underneath the WLA vision, that is something we can take forward as part of the influencing strategy.
And I think that's absolutely explicit in the conversation that we want to have at the next Economic Prosperity Board, in the context of London as a polycentric city, and absolutely setting out the strengths of West London and its economic clusters, the things that we already have and the things that we might want. I think that's the sort of the absolute intention of that conversation, not just that we're doing it in West London, but that we're also sort of setting out the stall for a better conversation about London's growth fundamentally, but also London's growth versus the levelling up agenda in the rest of the country, and the contributions that we should be making, yes, to levelling up within London, but also London's ability and power to be able to help level up the rest of the UK. So, my hope is that discussion that we have, hopefully, Steve, with one of your associates from Hammersmith and Fulham, also down the road in Brunel, that is absolutely the sort of the actions that stem from that conversation. But I think it's a fair point. Any more? Cool. All right. In that case, David, I think we're agreed. Are we agreed? Great. So we're going to move on now to the West London Orbital progress and context, including the next steps. Councillor Radjot and I had a very productive meeting with Seb Dance, Deputy Mayor for London, just the other day, to have the conversation about the West London Orbital and its increasing importance for North West London, not least because of the government's decision to perhaps, they're definitely stopping at Old Oak Common for a period of time, whilst the issue of the long-term future of the connection to Euston remains unknown. I have to say, having been to that site many times now in the context of OPDC, it does really feel like a very short-sighted decision, not least, of course, because they're going to have to bury the two tunnel boring machines into the ground before they begin tunnelling and are cleared to begin the tunnelling process to Euston. And get this, they're going to have to turn them on and off every week, like indefinitely, until the point at which they can actually be used. Because if they're not turned on and off and maintained, we're going to have two sort of rusty tunnel boring machines stuck in the ground, which I just think is absolutely bonkers and bizarre. But that's what there is. But the point about the West London Orbital, without heading off into too much of a tangent, is that it's going to be incredibly important for dispersal of people arriving at that station. And of course, it's going to be incredibly important in the context of unlocking all of the regeneration that we know that we continue to need to unlock along that corridor. So a very productive conversation. Of course, TfL are under incredible strain, not least in terms of their capital projects and the settlement that they have from government. Of course, and in a growing number of competing priorities in other parts of London, a diminishing pot with an even greater need. So our ability to make the arguments rightly on the West London Orbital, its benefits, and the multiplier effect that it can have for economic growth in West London is going to be increasingly important, particularly as we go to the next phase of the planning for it. So with that introduction, David, I hope I haven't stolen all of your thunder, but do you want to give us an update on where we are in the process and what you need from us today?
Yeah. And Majid and Anthony may want to come in as well on some of the detail. But in a nutshell, we're getting close to the end of what's called the GRIP 2 stage of work, which will confirm that it's technically feasible to build the scheme, much of which is on an existing line. Also, that the cost is not off the scale, ridiculous. It always seems a bit weird to say the cost is affordable if we haven't got a funding package in place. But there's a lot of work being done to work out the technical feasibility of building the line and the construction costs. And also we're also doing some work on benefits as well. And by the end of March, we shall have got to the end of that work, which will then allow us to make a decision on the next stage of work, which will get into sort of detailed design work and also start the public consultation and then end with an application under the Transport Works Act. So a lot of work's been done, real good collaboration with TfL, and that was endorsed at the meeting that we had yesterday with the Deputy Mayor for Transport. So there's continued political support for the scheme, and the strategic case, if anything, is now stronger with the kind of the ramping up of passenger numbers on the underground, the Elizabeth line, and as Councillor Mason says, HS2 coming into Old Oak Common. So we've put on the forward plan that we will be bringing we'll be bringing the scheme back to this board for a decision. I think we've said in July. So really, the paper is just to set out what we found out today, what we're going to be doing next, and to flag that there is a decision that will need to be made. To inform that decision, we'll be looking at what the benefits are to each of the boroughs, not just the boroughs that the line goes through, but all of the West London boroughs, but also the wider London impact as well. And it's probably just worth restating what broadly the benefits are. So it's about joining up some of our most disadvantaged and deprived areas to economic opportunities, which and connecting Brent Cross up with Old Oak Common and right down to the Great West Corridor in Hounslow. It's not just about sort of orbital transport as well. It's also about the fact that a lot of people travel from outside of London and come into London, but they do so by car because their only alternative is to pay expensive travels into the centre of London and back out to the bit that they want to get to. So it will relieve a lot of congestion off what is one of the busiest roads, which is the North Circular, which I think most of us will be familiar with. So it hits our economic, social and environmental objectives. So the strategic case is there, and the next stage of work will be to, before we move into the next stage of work, we'll have more detail on the cost and benefits and the funding package, which will give us the comfort to then progress. And we estimate that the cost of the next stage of work will be between 6 and 10 million over 2 to 3 years. And we're looking at how we can fund that between London government and the boroughs. And
okay, thank you, David. Yeah,
there's more detail on all of that in the paper.
Yeah, great. Right, any contributions, questions from members? Yeah, go for it. Yeah, go for it.
Thanks for the paper and thanks for updating it. The last point about sort of funding, sort of the 2.2D, sort of. I think there's something there, isn't there, right, about how we link in some of the opportunities that are being created through the OPDC, the HS2, right? Kath, your development at Barnet and the new station there as well, and sort of using that as a sort of leverage to highlight and promote the opportunities, right? The thing for me then, right, the point about the funding, right, is there something that we need to do ourselves then as part of the Economic Prosperity Board, right, in writing into government, right, as a board, and saying, setting out the opportunities that we see and how could actually benefit, right, sort of the wider determinants going forward from us as well, because obviously from a Brent perspective and a West London Alliance perspective, I think it does actually make sense for us to be sort of lobbying sort of a bit harder, and I think we do have the opportunity now. I think doesn't matter which government is coming in, to make the point now, because if we don't get in the door now, we may lose the momentum as such.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point, and some of the discussions that we've already had are ones in which, what is the relative profile of the West London Orbital in the context of some of the other major infrastructure projects that are already being sort of very well understood and championed. And you compare us to, say, for example, and unfortunately, the comparisons will be made in the context of a smaller envelope, the extension of the DLR, the extension of the Bakerloo line, and the sort of the economic cost benefit analysis for, if there is a smaller pot of infrastructure funding, like, who's going to get most bang for their buck, and what will the output look like. We've already had some discussions about how we could set out maybe a bit more of the economic benefit, both in terms of what it unlocks in regeneration terms and what it unlocks in growth terms. I think probably hitherto we've been very focused on modal shift and on congestion relief and on the environmental benefits. But I think in a changing economic picture that I think we've all had whilst the WLO has progressed, I think that's going to become increasingly more important to set out, as will be the fact that, in real terms, the actual costs that will need to be invested in making it operational will be much more sort of frugal than it necessarily will be sort of digging tunnels out in South London, even though I'm sure they need them. So I think that's going to be very important.
Just one other thing. I mean, as part of some of the work that we're looking to do in Brent, we've also been given some money from DLUHC in order to do a master plan study around Staples Corner. Right. So that links in with some of the work we're trying to do with Barnet, right? And honestly, right, the opportunities are actually increasing, right? And it's beginning to make even more sense for us to be actually sort of singing from the rooftops as well, right? In order to make sure, right, that we're sitting around the table, and trying to make a case, right, for some of this funding to come forward from government. And I think the conversations you guys have had with Seb Dance, I think we need to sort of capitalize on them now as such, rather than a bit later.
And I think that point about the point about Staples Corner is well made. I mean, again, one of the observations was maybe we don't necessarily have a clear sense of what the regeneration frameworks are along WLO routes that have been developed independently at a borough level. And if we can make the sort of the clear line argument that, from the Golden Mile through to Staples Corner, through to sort of OPDC, through to Brent Cross, that actually that infrastructure is important, then that needs to be sort of centre of the argument too. The other thing that sort of strikes me about specifically the West London Orbital is that, as we begin to talk about London as a polycentric city, like we do need to perhaps arrest the notion that all infrastructure investment should be about getting people to travel from Zone 5 to Zone 1. Actually, the radial transportation networks, Zone 3 to Zone 3, are as important in terms of the sort of new ways of working and the new patterns of behaviour. So I think that's going to be interesting, as sort of those dual messages about how a more distributed and fairer way for London to grow sort of become more apparent. It's going to need the infrastructure to support it. Steve, did I see you? Did you indicate that you wanted to say something? All right, fair enough. Tom, yeah.
Yeah, I just echo that, all of that from a Hounslow perspective as well. You mentioned the Golden Mile and along the A4. The opportunities here for the modal shift and all transport issues, absolutely. But it is about talking about that case for the economic development. And I was going to say exactly what you said. It isn't about being a residential hub for inner London. It's about saying, well, we can have residential for people traveling north and south, and and sharing residents, as it were, for jobs and prosperity, and making the best of that across West London. I think that's really, really important. That case can be made very strongly, and how we can all reap the benefits of that regeneration, whether it's at Staples Corner or whether it's along the Golden Mile, and talking to developers there. Absolutely.
Yeah, the vision for the West London Orbital can't be that we simply help people from poorer parts of West London, get to Brent Cross to work in minimum wage jobs in retail. It's got to be it's got to be one in which we really sing from the rooftops about what it can unlock across the route as well. I saw that provoked Kath to put her hand up. So go on, Kath.
So whilst there are, thank you, Chair. Whilst there are lots of retail jobs in Brent Cross Shopping Centre, obviously we're also developing 3 million square feet of office space in the new university. I have to give the advert, don't I? So actually, the range and quality of jobs will be quite broad, and will include new and growing industries as well as entry level roles. So I think good for West Londoners to be able to get there generally. I think what you're suggesting perhaps is that we do look at some lobbying now in preparation for an incoming government, so that we've got the story into the manifestos of the major, or if not into the manifestos, into the thinking of the major parties. But then we should also be looking at a kind of summer or autumn programme where we try and use things like Brent Cross West as a hook to get people to visit. I recall we were able to get access to the line to kind of take people on a visit that travelled the length of the line, and maybe this autumn is a good time to do that again, because we'll have a new mayor and a new government, and we can start to kind of build the excitement after as well as before. So, but yes, Brent Cross, lots of jobs.
No, I just being my typical controversialist self as a way of provoking more discussion. But no, I think that's good point, well made. David, did you want to come in?
No, I think that's helpful. We can take that all away. I think we're coming towards the end of this key stage of work, which is going to give us the information then to kind of move on to the next stage. And I think Kath at the meeting yesterday, I think, made a good point in relation to continuing to progress to this, even if we haven't got everything pinned down, because we need to actually accept that there is a strong strategic case for this, and we need to be ready to kind of go with it once we have got the funding package in place. So I think we want to learn the lessons from some of the other schemes that have been delivered in West London. So we'll also be looking at that. But I think to be able to fund the next stage, the boroughs need to have a strong cost benefit analysis done, and that's the next stage of work that we're looking at.
And I think, my understanding is that we anticipate having that discussion at the next Economic Prosperity Board, and it's going to be quite an important discussion, not least because, of course, we'll sweat out from TfL what the commitment actually is versus what we believe it is on paper. But we're really going to need to do some serious thinking about borough contributions, how that works through. All of us have got or will have our community infrastructure levy funding. No doubt we'll be seeking obligations from developments along that route. It's going to need, this is going to need investment if this is going to get off the GRIP 3 stage onto the GRIP 2 to GRIP 3 and beyond. And of course, but we know that we need to do that in sort of quite economically challenging times. But it's it's invest to grow as much as it's an invest to save. So let's make sure that we have those conversations ahead of the next board meeting, at which we do need to make some decisions and move forward. Okay, right. I think that pretty much takes us to the conclusion. Unless I'm wrong, that takes us pretty much to the conclusion of the meeting. We have the next meeting of the Economic Prosperity Board on the 17th of April. I believe that the next meeting of the WA Leaders Board, where we'll feed into, is on the 5th of March. So with that, thank you very much for your attendance, and enjoy the rest of your days.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, everyone.